Hello, it's Jamie J, and we are live finally. We'll see. Hopefully, we'll stay on board here. Let me go ahead and hop right into this since we're running a little bit late there, and we'll do the intro, and I'll bring on the one and only David Shriner-Cahn. So be with us in about 38 seconds. Hello, welcome to Live with Bottleneck. My name is Jamie J. I'm the CEO and founder of Bottleneck Distant Assistance, and that's not why we're here today, though. We are here today to talk to David Shriner-Cahn, and he's going to help you stop the bottleneck in your business. What we're going to be talking about is going solo, building your own successful business after a late career job loss. And David and I have been friends for quite a while. You probably already know him. He's been around. He's an entrepreneur, podcaster, and speaker of Smashing the Plateau. So how and why will David help you stop the bottleneck in your business? Well, after 28 years as a highly skilled employee, David was told that his job was over. In spite of the immediate trauma and fear, he knew that as his next step, he would rather work for himself and have more control over his destiny. That was in 2006. You're going to see a lot of similarities between me and David there, with the exception that he's incredibly talented and incredibly educated, whereas those are probably two areas I lack. However, today we're going to be talking. David is a thriving entrepreneur, podcaster, and speaker. He is guiding highly skilled professionals who are recovering from late career job loss and who yearn to impact the world with their knowledge and creativity by becoming successful entrepreneurs. So without any further ado, please allow me to welcome Mr. David Shriner-Cahn. How are you, sir?
Hey, Jamie. Well, you have a much more thriving beard than I have.
It's too bad they don't measure IQ in beards. So I am super stoked. You and I have been friends for a while, and how long have we known each other?
Well, I started podcasting in 2014. I think you were probably somewhere around the same time, give or take.
Yep.
And right, we probably met shortly thereafter.
Yeah. And boy, a lot has happened since then, huh?
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Well, before we get into our conversation today and talk a little bit more about going solo, smashing the plateau, and of course you, David Shriner-Cahn, wonder if maybe you can fill in some of the gaps. Tell us a little bit about you for those of the people that may be watching and never have a chance to meet you yet. Maybe they can learn more about you.
Sure. Well, as you said in the introduction, I am a podcaster. I host two shows, Smashing the Plateau and Going Solo. They can both be found at smashingtheplateau.com. We've been releasing podcast episodes every week since 2014. Wow.
You've been busy. And I know for a fact you've been busy because I've been on your show. I've seen what you're doing. You even hired a distant assistant to kind of help you out because you have some amazing things going on right now. What were some of the biggest challenges when you got started in podcasting?
What I didn't know that I didn't know.
What were some
with everything new? So to be specific, one of the things that I didn't realize is that I would say three of the most important things in podcasting, or frankly, any kind of content creation based on ideas, is consistency, frequency, and quality, and in that order. So I was really obsessed about quality, probably unnecessarily so. And the reality is, here's one of the things I've learned. There are people that are impressed that we've released at this point like 600 plus episodes of podcasts. And it adds, I think, some credibility, the fact that we've done that. Yet they actually haven't listened to any of the episodes that we've produced. So, which is why the consistency and the frequency is important, because people notice the consistency and the frequency, even if they don't read, listen, or watch your content.
Yeah, it starts popping back up there. It lets people know, hey, I can feel comfortable with this person. He's going to be back around. I can check in.
Well, I think one of the things it says is if I engage in any way with this person, there is likely to be follow through on whatever the plan is. Because I think one of the things consistency and frequency demonstrates is that somebody is able to follow through, and they're actually able to persevere. And frankly, perseverance is one of the most important characteristics of a successful entrepreneur.
Isn't that the truth? There's, oh my gosh. Well, you nailed it.
We could have a whole episode on that.
We really could. Holy cow. I could almost go down the ESS, entrepreneurial squirrel syndrome, right there. So two things really quick, and then I want to jump into what you're doing now and who you're helping and that kind of thing. When you started your podcast, Smashing the Plateau, why did you create another? And there's a reason I'm asking this question, by the way.
Why did I create a second podcast?
Yes.
So when I started Smashing the Plateau, it was a fairly general topic for entrepreneurs. One of the things that I had noticed, and my team had noticed, frankly, is that there were a lot of podcasts about startups. And in my work, both as an employee and as an entrepreneur and a consultant and guide, most of what I was focused on was implementation. And frankly, most of what the business owners and CEOs that I had worked with over the years were focused on, what they were focused on was implementation or execution on a plan. So I thought there was a lot more room for content that would help entrepreneurs if we focused on implementation. And so Smashing the Plateau was all about consistent implementation of your plan, measuring the results, and very tiny pivots to create long-term success. And again, that's a pretty broad topic. After hosting the show for several years and interacting with the audience, I realized that an awful lot of our audience consisted of solopreneurs, people who were knowledge experts. They had worked in their field often for decades, and they ran small businesses, often as consultants and coaches. And a lot of them started their career, like me, in the organizational setting as an employee, and then they shifted at some point to become an entrepreneur. And for many people, I would say probably for most people, that transition is quite challenging. I found that when I made the transition after 28 years as an employee to become an entrepreneur, even though I was responsible for business operations in most of my career, so I knew a lot about running a business, there were still a lot of things I didn't know, and I had to learn. What I've seen in our audience is people are usually, those people that are experts, they work in their field for a long time, and then they become consultants or coaches later in their career. They're really good at the results they produce for their clients. And their biggest struggles are around running their business. So they have challenges with marketing, with sales, with pricing, with billing, with financial management, with recruiting, with supervision. All things that they've had to learn as new skills when they've become entrepreneurs, often at age 50 plus. So I decided to launch a second podcast with a much narrower focus called Going Solo, which is about that early stage of transition when you become an entrepreneur for the first time, typically at age 50 plus, after 20, sometimes even 30 years or more in corporate as an employee. And you may have been a high achieving, highly paid employee, but still, when you become an entrepreneur for the first time, it is quite challenging. And so we talk about what are those challenges and how do you address them?
Yeah, you know what? It's really neat to be able to niche down like that, and it's exciting that the journey that you had with smashing the plateau ultimately took you in that direction. And I think earlier when you said you don't know what you don't know, kind of, this is maybe one of those things that you really didn't know where you were going to be. But based on the information that you gathered and learned along the way, you were able to kind of niche down and kind of, you have the general in smashing the plateau and then a more niche specific podcast there. And they complement one another fairly well, I think.
Yeah, at this point, I would say Smashing the Plateau is for established consultants and coaches, people that have been in business for a while. They have demonstrated that they are able to get business. They have clients. They have paid work. They would like to grow their business. They'd like to get it to the next level, but that initial stage has more or less been accomplished. And going solo is really, how do you gain a foothold in a particular niche, and how do you establish a brand and a name for yourself and reputation, etc.
That's fantastic. So my second question based on that, and thank you for the overview there, which I think is really important. By the way, highly recommend, if you have not listened to Going Solo or Smashing the Plateau, that should be the very next podcast you go over and listen to. David's fantastic, and he has some amazing guests on there, and quite a few of them. So the second question is, I don't want to give it away. Okay, okay, after having Going Solo, it's been about a year now, a little over a year.
Yeah, a little over a year.
How has that helped your business?
Well, I think for one thing, it has really helped solidify a niche that we were already moving into and gaining a reputation in. So just, the fact that we're releasing content every week around this subject has, I think, helped solidify Smashing the Plateau as a thought leader in the space of late career consultants and coaches.
So that in and of itself, I think, has been one of the outcomes. So you see, I'm putting the image back up there. Building your own successful business after a late career job loss, going solo. That's kind of morphed into something now. I'm wondering if you had expected it to take shape as it's kind of taken shape now.
I mean, yes and no. Yes, I knew that I wanted to go deeper into in a particular direction. Exactly how it's unfolded, honestly, it's like there's a tiny pivot with almost every podcast guest, because one of the benefits of being a podcast host of an interview-based show is that you learn from every single guest.
Oh, that's huge.
Right. So initially, when we first launched the show, I would dare say that a lot of what I might have focused advice with early stage consultants and coaches has to do with strategy and tactics. And after what have we had, like maybe 60 or so episodes of going solo, plus several hundred of Smashing the Plateau. At this point, I would say that's probably not what I would advise early stage consultants and coaches, particularly if they're launching their business following a job loss. And the way I'm using job loss as a somewhat generic term, but one of the things I have learned after doing the show for a year is that for an awful lot of folks, the job loss wasn't voluntary. And I don't care how much you may have thought about starting a consulting or coaching business and dreamed of having more control over your work life. When somebody else pulls the trigger for you with the timing, it's traumatic. And in our culture, there's so much of our identity and self-worth um, tied into our job. If we're an employee, if somebody else determines that the job ends, even if it's not for performance reasons, it has it just has a crushing blow for the ego. And as a result of what I've heard from so many people who have started their businesses willingly, but after their job was terminated by their employer, that initial stage is very traumatic, and it is fraught with all kinds of negative emotions.
I was just going to say, a lot of emotions.
Yeah. So now what I'm advising people is you need to create some space for yourself to address the emotional impact of being fired. That's really important. If you can afford it financially, I advise people to take a significant amount of time to actually just kind of decompress and work on their do some self-reflection, work on stuff that's inside them, as opposed to trying to build a business immediately. So if you can, if you can manage financially to have no income for a year, don't focus on trying to produce the income right away. Focus on yourself, self-care. What do you need? What does your family need? What do your loved ones need? We've seen during this year, during the pandemic, life has been upended for so many people. And for a lot of people, they've actually taken the time to do some self-care and sort of think about what's important for their lives. So if you're age 50, 55, 60, and your career has taken a sudden pivot, it's really important to think about what's important to you. If you're in good health and your finances are okay, you may want to be working and perhaps need to be working for several more decades. So you want it to be as meaningful as possible and as rewarding as possible. And of course, you want it to be as financially successful as possible as well. But first, you've got to like step back from the rat race that you may have been in for a number of years and just take some time to reflect.
I really like that. I think that advice is huge. Yeah, absolutely. I could not recommend that enough. There are sometimes, like you said, it's a surprise. For me, in my past life, I was not always the best at managing money. I will definitely be the first to say that, and there will be several others that will say yes. It took us a while to get through to you, Jamie. So for those of us out there, and I'm saying us because I'm now in the 5-0 club, and I've been let go from a position before, and I've experienced the embarrassment and the shame, but I was not in a position to where I could hang out for a year. I needed to find something, get back to work, and it just so happened that was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. So bootstrapped and all, I kind of started right away. I think I took a day. I probably needed to take longer, but I needed to jump into it. What advice would you give to somebody who's not in a financial position? They've still got family, they still got the mortgage, they still got all of that stuff, and maybe they have 2 or 3 months instead of a year. What would your advice then to them be?
Yeah, so there are some things you can do that will still bring in income, but won't tax your emotions the same way. So one thing you can do is do something that is very different. I mean, depends on what kind of work you can get and who who may be able to help you get some paid work. But if you can do some work that is either not related to your profession or some work that is interim, it will take the pressure off you mentally from trying to succeed in a whole new working environment. Right. So if like, for example, let's say you are good at financial management. Maybe you can connect with somebody who needs something like an interim interim CFO for a small business, where you could be super helpful, but you know that it's time limited. It's not what you want to do long term, and the company doesn't need you long term. So let's say you're able to land something that you and the employer agree is going to be 12 months. Well, that'll give you space to kind of decompress emotionally and think about what it is you might want to do long term after that interim position ends. Or maybe you can get some other kind of contract work that's time limited, just to provide some income, and again to provide some kind of mental buffer. So you're not, again, it's something that you're not emotionally invested in long term. Is really the point I'm trying to make.
You know what? Something that I want to point out too, and you talked about emotions and things like this, and obviously I would look to you as the expert on any of this, since you have had all these interviews on this. But one of the things that I would that I don't want to call it a regret. When I first started, you're right. There was something to be said about when you meet somebody for the first time. You're like, "Hey, how are you? What's your name? Oh, what do you do for a living?" Like that's a second or third question that comes out. And for many of us, we feel shame, or there was a lot of pride. That pride pill we have to swallow, just to get a lot of time that comes into play. And so for a lot of people that are going through this experience right now, yeah, taking another position, doing something, just be honest. In my opinion, just be honest with where you're at and what you're doing. And I think you'll have that much more respect. Had I done one thing different when I made that transition from corporate America into being an entrepreneur, running my own company, I was almost in that fake it till I make it mode so much. Oh yeah, doing this, and we're doing this, and we weren't. And so I was fibbing. I was flat out fibbing. And I thought I needed to, when in retrospect, had I just been on the up and up, hey, I've just left this industry. This is what I'm doing now. It's my passion. I'm really going after it. I'd love to have an opportunity to work with you. I think I would have been that much further ahead. And that was something that I still struggle with to this day, because your word is your bond. And in this day and age, with technology growing so quickly, all you have to do to go to a competitor is click on a button, and you're gone. They're gone somewhere else. So integrity is a big deal. What do you say to that?
Well, here's something you can say. First of all, one of the things that I think it's important to do while you're in this interim period and you're doing some self-reflection is to also look at who you really feel compelled to serve and what you think they need. So you can spend the time not only doing self-reflection, but also doing some very low-level market research. And if you're meeting somebody that is for the first time to ask you what you do, you can say, oh, well, right now I'm taking a sabbatical and I'm researching, and then you can fill in the blank about who might be a good introduction for you to meet to do a little market research. So like, let's say for you, it was before you launched Bottleneck, you could say, I'm taking a sabbatical and I'm researching how small businesses manage remote teams. And I'd love, if you know anybody who is in that space, I'd love for some introductions.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
Right. So it shows your mind is working on something serious, yet you're not being pegged as doing something that you really aren't doing yet.
Yep. I love it. And all that comes in the forms of questions, right? Questions are powerful.
Questions are very powerful.
I've learned a lot of that from you. You ask a lot of good questions. You have some experience with that, though, I think.
Well, one of the things I also try to do in particularly in work with clients is for somebody who's in a guiding role, if you're able to phrase an open-ended leading question, it can help the other party get to the next step and not feel like it's a have to kind of advice.
Yeah. Get in the habit of asking how questions. How do you do that? How do you do this? Or
why?
You. Yeah.
What would success look like for you for the next step?
Yep.
It's one of my favorite ones, as you
Love
know.
that. I love that. So what's next then for you?
So we are, in addition to continuing to release the 2 podcasts, we are planning something like what we're on right now that you're hosting, which is a live series to provide education for consultants and coaches that are trying, if they're experienced consultants and coaches, they're trying to build the next level in their business. If they're just starting out, particularly after a late career job loss, we will talk about some of these issues. How do you figure out what you love doing the most? How do you figure out what you're most competent at doing? How do you learn where there is a market for the skills that you have built up over 30 years? How do you price? How do you start to engage with an audience?
Mm.
All those kinds of things.
And as of the time of this recording, we're getting ready to wrap up year 2020. Any big plans for the upcoming year to roll this out then, or do you know yet?
Yeah, this will be rolled out in 2021. It's not going to happen in 2020. We're almost done.
Yep.
But yeah, it'll come out soon, and it'll be a new channel for us.
That's cool.
Right? Like with everything else I said to you earlier, like with podcasting at the beginning, I didn't know what I didn't know. There's an awful lot I and people on my team don't know about how this is going to play out, but we're going to start and see how it goes.
I love it. I love it. It's almost the very definition of an entrepreneur, right? Let's just try it.
What's the worst thing that could happen?
You learn.
Right.
That's fantastic. So, how do people get in touch with you if they want to be on your show or learn more about you?
The repository and the central hub for all of our information and how to get in touch with us is on our website, smashingtheplateau.com. Both podcasts are there. There's a contact form. You can get in touch with me. And if you want to be a guest on either podcast, there are guest applications on there. Just go to the menu, look for the guest application.
And one thing I want to point out too, your process is seamless. It is super tight.
Well, coming from you, Jamie, I'm really grateful to hear that. We've worked hard at it.
That's what makes it. If it's super simple, you can tell you put some time into it. So yeah, kudos to you there.
And by the way, Jamie, I'm grateful for your help with our distant assistant that we've arranged through Bottleneck. So, speaking of process, I've hired a lot of people in my life, and your process for recruiting people is phenomenal. I've never encountered anything that is that is as deep and as that and works as well.
Well, coming from you, that means a lot. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure too. It's nice to when you can work with people and just enjoy one another's business and support each other. I think that's what it's all about. Thankfully, I've been introduced to you and our paths have crossed, and yeah, it's just a blessing to be a part of your sphere.
Ditto. I'm so grateful that we got introduced, and I've gotten to know you and Sarah, and we actually met in person.
We met. That's a very rare thing before COVID.
Before COVID.
We actually met. That was awesome. And you took us on an awesome little tour of New York. What was it? This Skywalk?
The High Line. The High Line.
High Line. Okay. I couldn't remember. Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah. Oh, we had so much fun. And thank you for taking your day. And thank you for
hopefully we'll do it again.
Yes. And please make sure to tell your wife thank you for letting us steal you away for a day.
Absolutely. Sorry she couldn't join us.
Yeah, doggone it. Well, next time we'll have to do it again when this whole thing clears up. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap?
No, I think we're good.
We're good? That's it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, can you hold on real quick and I'll just wrap up?
Of course.
Okay. We have been talking to David Shriner-Cahn. He's an entrepreneur, podcaster, and speaker of Smashing the Plateau. Go check it out today. I'll put up his website. It's smashingtheplateau.com. If you have any questions to ask David, go ahead and leave them in the comments if you're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Periscope, and or Twitter. And I'll make sure to forward those along to David so that he can answer them for you. Smashingtheplateau.com is where you can go learn more about him. I want to say a special thank you to David for taking up his time today and for bearing with us as we got some initial technical challenges ironed out in the very beginning. Other than that, my name is Jamie J. I'm the CEO and founder of Bottleneck Distant Assistance. And thank you for letting David help you stop the bottleneck in your business today. This is Live with Bottleneck. Don't forget, make your own ripple.